just now got back in here, so you have no clue who I am. She just did a really lovely intro, and I appreciate it. But I'm Carrie Grace, for those of you who were still out there. That's just who I am. So I want to give you a little bit of a background in case you missed it. I've been working with survivors of I would say sexual exploitation. I got more into trafficking later, but started in 2010. And it's one of those things that I tell people, first of all, I was just kind of born on this battlefield. I didn't know it. You don't know when you're born into a family that it's completely screwed up. You don't know that until much later in life. So I had no clue that my family was not normal. I was just surviving every single day, and found out later, much later, that things were not as they should have been. So I'll get into that in a moment. Anyhow, so grew up in a very dysfunctional family. Anybody familiar with the ACE assessment, the adverse childhood experiences? Yeah, unfortunately, I got a 10 out of 10 on that test. It's not the one you really want to be successful at, but I had every single one of those categories at different points in my childhood. So there wasn't a part of dysfunction that I wasn't familiar with personally and intimately. And luckily, I'm not a serial killer, so that's good news. So it could have turned out really differently for me. But in the other, I guess, there's kind of two tracks that led me to being where I am today. One was I was born on this battlefield, didn't know it. The second reason, back in 2004, I was a stay-at-home mom. And I tried to have a nice little bubble that seemed safe to me because I'd already been through every form of crazy. So I was trying to make my life seem really comfortable, normal, and safe. And in this experience of being a stay-at-home mom, one day my doorbell rings. There's 3 lovely young ladies standing on my doorstep. And they said, "We were told if we came here, you would be nice to us." And that was a really strange greeting. They didn't seem to have anything to sell, so I couldn't figure out, normally there's like a clipboard involved and they've got something that, they're trying to sell. Nothing. And I said, who sent you to my house? Because I'm trying to get some context around these women. And they said, well, we went to this church because they had this sign up in front of the church that said, if you need financial help, to come. Well, what that church really meant was you can do some Dave Ramsey classes here. That's what they really meant. But these ladies thought, yeah, we need financial help. So they came into the church. And they're here talking to this sweet church lady. And they're explaining to this church lady, we need some financial help. And the lady says, well, do you know Jesus? And they're like, okay, do we have to say yes? How do we get the money? What's the right answers, right, to this question? And she said, we'd love for you to come to our church. And the lady said, oh, we can't come to your church. And she said, of course you can. Anybody can come to our church. And they said, no, we're strippers here at the club in Fort Worth. And if we come to your church, we're going to see our customers, and they're going to be with their wives and their families, and they're going to know that we don't belong. So the lady told us to come find you and that you would be nice to us. You don't have to be real smart to figure out if maybe you're called to work with a certain group of people when they literally come ring your doorbell and say, we were told if we came here, you'd be nice to us. So I invite these women into my home and just started hearing their stories. I didn't know anything. I didn't have any education in working with people who had been sexually exploited. I had no qualifiers. The only thing that qualified me was some old lady at a church told these 3 women that I would be nice to them. It was really that simple. And I think sometimes when we talk about this topic, it can start to feel really overwhelming. And I just want to start with the basics. Sometimes, especially those of y'all that are intersecting these types of individuals, sometimes what they need is just some human kindness. They just need to be treated like a real person. And we can start there. So that was really what got me into learning more about this particular population. And these women just kept showing up at my house because you know what? They did want to learn about God. They just didn't want to do it at church. So they would come with a clipboard with all their questions, and they would ask me all these things. I didn't always know the answers, but we just got to know each other. We built friendships. 2 of the ladies were actually able to leave that job because guess what? They didn't want to work there. Isn't that shocking news? That was not their dream, and they wanted out. They just didn't know how to get out. And now their resume says Rick's Cabaret, and that makes it really difficult for the next job for a multitude of reasons. So 2 of them were able to get out. They got different jobs, but one of them, she's beautiful, beautiful girl, but she had a daughter who was disabled. And she couldn't leave her daughter alone. She couldn't put her in daycare because there wasn't a daycare situation that would take care of her daughter with her specific needs. So she had this live-in boyfriend that would stay so that she could work a few nights a week at the club and make the money that she needed to support her daughter. And this woman, I will never forget her, because she would come to my house before her shift, and she didn't want to go. She would literally throw up in my bathroom because she was physically sick. And she's telling me, I don't want to sit on anybody's lap. I don't want anybody to touch me. I don't want to drink till I pass out. I don't want to do this anymore. That was the reality. That's the truth. And she would pull herself together and make herself go do it again. And I didn't know how to help her at the time. This is, like I said, this is 2004. I didn't know of any organizations. I didn't know how to help her. All I could say was, I think that, if we look for some other options, maybe God would help us and maybe there would be a way out. Like, I didn't know. But she has stayed in me. She's why I started trying to figure out how to help. And it takes a lot of different resources. You can't just well-wish somebody and give them a little gift package and tell them Jesus loves you and think they can now get out of that. They can't. It takes a lot. It took starting support groups. It took training at mentors. It took having financial coaches. It took having counselors. It took having employers that would give them viable jobs and ways to safely have a work environment that they could enter into. It took a lot. And I just started building one thing at a time, one thing after another. And we began to have a lot of women showing up. They were coming to these support groups. They were getting out of the industry. We had a great success rate. We had an average of about 30 women every week would come. They were still working at the strip clubs. We're like, we don't care, just come to the support group. You're welcome. We're going to give you a gas card to pay for your gas. You're going to have a home-cooked meal. We're going to have childcare provided while you're here so that everything was solved for and they could come and get some support. And you know what? 85% of the women that came one time to visit our support group ended up leaving the industry. I've never seen anything like it. I have literally, and it's not because we had some kind of great magic formula. I promise you we were making it up as we went along. That's just the truth, okay? We were like, oh, we need this piece in place. We didn't think about that. We were just learning as we went. But what happened was they got surrounded. They had support. And guess what? That wasn't what they wanted to do with their lives. It wasn't. And we want to numb ourselves so that we can still dabble in some of these things. And we want to say, oh, she likes doing that. She's having a good time. She's just putting herself through college. I'm helping with her scholarship fund. Like, that's all that's going on here. There's nothing bad. And it's not real. I sit with these women. I don't know how many I don't even know. I've lost count of how many women I've worked with over the years that are just like those women. The story is the same. Every single one of them want out. It transitioned for me in 2014 into really understanding what was happening with sex trafficking. This was like things I had begun to see because I was in the strip clubs every month in DFW. There's over 40. We were like number 2 in the nation for strip clubs per capita after Portland, Oregon. So there you go, Portland. Not sure what's going on there, but they have a lot of strip clubs. Anyhow, so we were going in every month, meeting with the women. We would go in the strip club dressing rooms, talk to the ladies, invite them to our support group, all the things, right? And I'm seeing a lot of activities at the strip clubs. I don't know if y'all have those around here. There's a lot of things happening in the strip clubs, okay? There's all kinds of drugs are going on. The pimps are there watching their girls because they got to get some more clients. There's escorting happening out of. It's just an easy population to get more business, right? And so it's all very intertwined and overlapping. But in 2014 was a day that kind of shifted our organization from just thinking of it as we're going into strip clubs to seeing it from a different vantage point. I'm sitting in my office and get a call, and it's a grandmother on the phone, and she is frantic. She's chasing this car down the highway because these traffickers have taken her granddaughter, who was, I think she was 16 years old. And she had gotten away from them before, but now she's back with them again. And this grandmother is literally in her car following them. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she goes, I need help. They've got my granddaughter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have a support group for women. We go to strip clubs. Like I don't chase traffickers. Like I have no qualifications for this whatsoever. Have you seen me? Like I am the girliest girl. I don't have a special skill set, to go after traffickers. And so I'm like in the office going, have we gotten calls like this? And they were like, no, this has never happened before. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do? We couldn't call the police. She was like, no, don't call the police because she's already got a record for prostitution. They're just going to take her back in. So let that settle in. A 16-year-old has a record for prostitution. That's a problem. So she's just frantic. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know who to call. And one of the girls that worked with me, she was like, wait, we had a booth at a conference last week, and there was this guy, and he had this booth, and I think he does something like this, and here's his card, and his name is Roe. I'm like, well, give me Roe's card, whoever he is, and let me call him and see what he can do. So I called Roe. I was like, I don't know you. You don't know me. There's a grandma. She's chasing traffickers, blah, blah, blah. I give him the whole 9 yards, and I said, my coworker thinks you can help. He was like, yeah, if you can get me her phone number, what direction they're headed, and a recent photo of the girl. And I was like, that's it? He was like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I get all this information, give it over to him, and I have a support group. All these women are showing up, and I got to run support group. And now there's a grandma and a granddaughter and traffickers and Roe, are out doing whatever, and I don't even know what's going on. 2 hours later, I get a call from Roe, and he says, I'm sitting at the Waffle House with the grandma and the granddaughter. What do you want me to do with them? I was like, who the heck are you? And how did you just do that? I was like, I don't know what's going on, but my gosh, that was impressive. Well, I now work for Roe at Freedom Shield Foundation, and we ended up getting married. So there's that. There's a whole story that came from that one phone call to Roe, who ended up now he's my husband. So that worked out for us. Well, Roe is a former FBI special agent. Back in 2009, when he started this organization, he knew that evil was going on in the world. He had to deal with it as an FBI agent. He was an undercover guy and had to work all the cartel stuff, so he knows what human beings are capable of doing with other human beings. Well, in 2009, he gets a call. I'm sorry, not a call. He gets an email from a nurse friend of his who is in a village outside of Nairobi, Kenya. And this nurse had been working in this orphanage, and she comes to show up, and that orphanage had been raided by a militia group. They had murdered the house mom that lived there with the kids. They had gang raped 2 little girls and taken these kids off the boys were going to be forced into child soldiers. The girls were going to be sex trafficked. And she's devastated, and she reaches out to Roe. It happened to be Thanksgiving morning, 2009, here in the United States when he got that email. And something rose up in him, which I'm sure for the men in this room, that thing that rises up in you that goes, oh no, this can't happen. This can't happen. I know how to do stuff. I've got some skills. I've been trained. Why don't we use it to fight this kind of evil? So he calls up his buddy, who happens to be a Navy SEAL. He calls his dad, obligates them to be on his board because he's like, I'm about to start a nonprofit and we're going to go do stuff. And again, this isn't to go and let's put guns ablaze and busting in doors. Let's go get the traffickers. It's not that kind of fight, right? Y'all know that. It doesn't work that way. But they knew if they could begin to, first of all, meet people where they are in this fight, go where the people are vulnerable, find out what the vulnerabilities are, solve for those, and begin to get intel, find out what can we know. You know, you go and you win the hearts and the minds of people in a community. You show up with resources, you begin to get the information of who's vulnerable, who's doing what. You find out who the players are. And they started having a lot of success. They were working overseas, and this is primarily an international organization until I came along and brought all of that here domestically, because that was my specialty. And through that process, they set up operations in Africa, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in different places where it's sometimes easier to work internationally than it is here, just so y'all know. It's a lot easier sometimes. So they were having a lot of success as an organization. So I get connected to them in 2014 because of the grandma, right? Well, in 2016, it was time to return the favor. They're over in Iraq working to recover the victims from ISIS. Any of y'all remember all of that? It was definitely the worst trauma I've ever personally seen in my life, what happened to these individuals. They asked me to come with them because they're rescuing these women and children, getting them to the refugee camps, and they were committing suicide because there was no trauma care. If you can imagine surviving what they had survived at the hands of ISIS, and then you give up hope once you're rescued because you can't deal with the aftermath of the trauma. When I showed up at those refugee camps, which I'm just going to tell you again, there was nothing about me that screamed, oh, she's the most obvious choice to go up into Iraq in the middle of ISIS and start working with the people who were being rescued. Like, I, again, have no special training, right? I had to sit every morning and be briefed by Muzz, the Australian Special Forces dude who's like 7 feet tall, named Muzz. That gives you a clue. And every morning over breakfast, I had to sit with Muzz, and Muzz is showing me, these are the different checkpoints, and between checkpoint 1 and checkpoint 2, if we get attacked from this side, you have to go here, and here's your flare, and here's your burner, and I had all this stuff, and I had to learn all these things, and I had to repeat it back to him every morning just to get to the camps to work with these women, okay? And that's what they're living in all the time. I'm in a camp, and there's bombs going off. You can hear the bombs still going off 15 minutes down the road. So every time another bomb goes off, they're re-traumatized because they don't know if their loved ones were a part of that just then. Do you see? Like, it was just an ongoing complex trauma mess. I get into these camps, and these women are having nonstop seizures from the trauma. And the doctors that had come in to try to help think that they all have epilepsy all of a sudden. I'm like, no, they don't. This is from the trauma, but they didn't know how to treat it. So I'm telling you all this to say, this issue is a worldwide global issue. If you don't know that it's real, I'm here to tell you it's real. It's real in India. I've been in the red light district working with the women there. It's real in the Philippines, it's real in Thailand, it's real in Iraq, and it's real right here. Unfortunately, we've made it to the top of the list as the nation that is most responsible for creating the demand for sex trafficking. All around the world, all arrows lead back to the United States. We are the #1 creators of the demand for sex trafficking. In 2018, if you keep up with the TIPS report, which is the Trafficking in Persons report that's released by the Department of Justice every year, 2018 was the year that the United States made it to the top of the list. It was the United States, Mexico, and Philippines. So that's where we sit in the global perspective of human trafficking. That's where the United States sits. We get the #1 spot. When you look at 40 million modern-day slaves, and we're #1, there's a lot happening right here, and there's a lot of work to do, and we need all hands on deck. So I just want to, first of all, thank you that you're even willing to do whatever your vantage point on this is to combat this, to go against it, to raise awareness, to identify potential victims, to provide aftercare services for them. Every single person is needed on this battlefield. I have more work than I could ever possibly do. It's a daily feeling of inadequacy. I can tell you that. Like, we never feel like we're doing enough. As an organization, this past year, we finally, our numbers are now, we've been able to recover over 17,000 victims, which is incredible, and it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket when you look at numbers like 40 million. That's why we don't walk around telling everybody how many rescues we've made, because it sounds stupid. It's like, that's not impressive. We have so much work to do. So as an organization, we still primarily work internationally. We have teams right now in Afghanistan. We have teams in the Ukraine. We have teams in Iraq, in the Philippines. We're just positioned in different places around the world. But what we're doing right here domestically is working hand in hand with, first of all, we have national human trafficking hotlines that once someone calls in to a hotline, those hotlines, they don't have resources themselves. They have to connect them to resources. So we're one of those first responder resources that they can tap into. And we also work with Homeland Security, with law enforcement entities, and a lot with the medical community. Is there anyone here from the medical community by any chance? Awesome. I would tell you, if you're in law enforcement of any kind, if you're in the medical community, you are intersecting victims all the time. They're just not necessarily identified, but you are intersecting all of them. So we get the calls from those different organizations and from other nonprofits. And our team is able to transport. We're able to do all the security for that. We do have access to aircraft as well, because do they ever have an ID? No, they do not. Can they get on a commercial flight? No, they cannot. So if they're in another state, we have to go get them, and it's just a lot faster to fly. So we're grateful for the pilots that offer their time and their planes. We just have to cover the fuel, which is amazing. So we're able to transport victims safely, and then we run safe houses. So our program was really to fill the gap between identification and long-term restoration. Long-term restoration programs are awesome. They come alongside these women for 1 year to 2 years and really help them get healing. They get the trauma care that they need. The problem is they can be identified sitting in your police station. Okay, do you have time to find a long-term restoration program for them? Do you have time to call and see if there's any beds available? Do you have time to then help them fill out an application and do an interview? And no, like, your job is not that. You're not called to do that. You're supposed to take care of whatever the issue was that was the crime. And then you need someone else to come and take care of the needs of these victims, right? So I wanted to make it easy, because it takes on average 10 to 30 days for a victim to get into long-term housing. I'm sorry, that's impossible. You cannot, while you're being trafficked, say, "Excuse me, Mr. Trafficker, I need to go do an interview to get into a long-term program." And they have to do a Zoom call with me to see if I'll be a good fit for their program. It's not going to happen. And I saw we are not ever getting them out of the situation to begin with, because there's too big of a gap between identification and long-term restoration. So our program fits right in the middle. We're like the ICU of this spectrum of aftercare. We're able to it could take us as little as 2 hours up to 48 hours, depending on where they are in the United States, to be able to get a victim and begin to provide the care that they need through our Safe House program. In our Safe House program, we do provide medical. We help them with all the legal issues that they may be dealing with. We help them with child placement if they need safe housing for their kids. And we just do stabilization and coping skills to help them come out of fight, flight, freeze to be able to make a decision for where they want to go long term. Okay? if they can make a choice themselves, we can present options to them, let them decide. I feel like we're going to be more successful because they have had the chance of not operating in crisis mode where they're still unsafe, trying to make a life decision, right? None of us make our best decisions under that kind of pressure. So that's really what we're doing as an organization here, is running these safe houses. Right now we have an emergency shelter, which is up to 72 hours, and we have 2 safe house locations in the DFW area. I'm giving you the specifics in case you just need this information and you get hungry later and need to go and get food. I'm giving you some the critical stuff up front. We will get to the PowerPoint, I promise. Just so you know, if you reach out to us, we have a direct person who will work with you, and then we have a number that victims can call us directly, okay? So that way you can work with us, and we're going to get whatever information you can give us, and then we will give them the opportunity to reach out themselves if they want help, and they can contact us directly, and we'll help them through that process. In running these safe houses, our goal is to open 35 safe houses in 35 cities across the United States. Right now, there's somewhere between the last numbers that were really solid numbers were taken in 2017 of how many beds there were available for sex trafficked victims. That was 529. I think we're up to around 1,000 to 1,200 beds now across the United States. But when you look at, on average, 300,000 underage victims on the streets of America every single day, we haven't even tried yet to provide options for them. So as many beds as we can provide, we're going to. One thing that is different about our program, I just want to give you this up front because it's important for you to know. We move 1 victim at a time through our Safe House program. We don't bring in more than 1. I tried that. It wasn't great. The reason being, this is when they're in the highest level of crisis mode. This is when they're coming off drugs. All of that is just swirling around them. They just got their phone taken away from them because we don't let them have their phone. They're in a heightened sense of everything is difficult right now. And when we bring in another person after we get one girl stabilized for maybe 10 days, you bring in another one, everything gets stirred back up again. It just wasn't good. It has been more successful to move them 1 at a time through our program and then help them get successfully placed. On average right now, we're getting placement within 14 days. We've had successful placements with every girl we've served so far, which we're really, really grateful for. Our long-term partners are happy to accept women from our program because they know we've already done a lot of the hard stuff and we've helped them to get stabilized so that they're going to be set up better for success in that program. So we're hoping to provide a really great solution to the big picture problem. So that's a little bit about the organization, what we're doing currently. So as you can see, we have this mission statement that is super, wait, what am I doing wrong? I'm going to try again. There we go. Super vague on purpose, just because the work that we do internationally, it's better if you just don't draw attention to yourself. So you can do the work without being noticed all the time. So we're funding global counter-human trafficking and religious persecution because a lot of times those go hand in hand. And we provide trauma care for victims, training and resources to religious communities. So this may be one-on-one for you. That's fine. We all know human trafficking is actually a real thing, and it is modern-day slavery. There are more slaves in the world today than there have been at any time in history, and it's on our watch. So yes, we're needed. Absolutely. This is the definition. I think what's important is, again, just the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. So you've got the labor trafficking and the sex trafficking in this definition. A crime that involves exploiting a person for labor services or commercial sex. Y'all are probably all familiar with that, but it just lays the groundwork. 4 types of human trafficking: sex trafficking, labor trafficking, black market organ trafficking, and child soldiers. In Turkey, that's where we were dealing with the black market organ trafficking. If any of y'all are familiar with some of that stuff, it just gets real twisted up. So unfortunately, these poor kids who had already been through hell at the hands of ISIS were then easily thrown away to be sold for their organs. It was just like this chain that was happening from Iraq through Turkey. So our teams did get involved in setting up some cool ways of being able to intervene in that. And then child soldiers, which again, those two we don't primarily see happening here in the United States now, but overseas our work, a lot of it is in those categories as well. Here in the United States, it's just sex trafficking and labor trafficking, but I would say that we do create the demand for the black market organ trafficking as well. Okay, so let's talk about what this looks like. How many of you have worked directly with a survivor of human trafficking? Awesome. Please feel free to raise your hand and share or give examples or insight that you have from your experience, because I'm only giving you my experience, okay? I'm just one person. So y'all are free to interrupt. So how does it, I love how trafficking, the G is on the other end. I've tried, y'all, it's fine. Y'all know what it means. How does it happen? First of all is grooming. This book, I'm going to recommend it. You can get it on Amazon. It's called Mind Games. This was written by a trafficker. He has 30 years in the game and got out, which is awesome. But he wrote the book. He wrote it with a therapist as well as with one of his victims. He tells you what he did to groom these girls. His name is Derek Williams, and the book is called Mind Games. I think I have a reference page at the very end of this too that'll have it up on the screen, so take a picture of that. May be helpful. But I highly recommend. This will give you insight into the mind of these predators. Grooming is what they are great at. And they know how to ask the right questions, like Latasha was saying. They know how to ask the right questions. They know how to see vulnerabilities. They can smell it, okay? They know what they're doing. Again, when I go back to just my own life story, my father, who I had to end up putting in jail, and this also happened in 2014, 2 days after I get the call from the grandma, 2 days later, I get a call from an investigator who says, your father's under investigation for ongoing sexual abuse of minors. Would you participate in the investigation? We see that you reported him 20 years ago. I'm like, yeah, I did, and nothing happened. So are you going to do something this time? And he said, absolutely. And I said, okay, then I'll help you. Began working with that investigator, which he is still to this day my hero. That man, he knew what the heck he was doing, and he did not back down. I've never seen anything like him. He was for the victims. And I'm telling you, when men show up, when real men show up, and they do what they were created to do, which is to protect, which is to defend, when men show up and do that, things happen. All right? And that man was a man, and he handled business, and he took my dad down, okay? So we're working on this investigation. Well, in the process of that, I remember sitting with my dad, because I had to confront him the first time I turned him in, with one particular victim of his. And he says to me about this 11-year-old girl that he was abusing, well, she was coming on to me. And I just wanted to be like, why don't you go look in the mirror? Nobody wants you, okay? Nobody is thinking they want you, first of all. Secondly, no 11-year-old girl is interested in you. She's thinking about playing with her friends, not doing all this stuff you made her do. That's how twisted the mindset is. To keep going down this path, you have to keep lying to yourself to make yourself feel okay about what you're doing, right? So again, get into the psyche of what this looks like. So then grooming is their technique. They're smooth. And they look for, again, the average age of girls in the United States, or of people that are trafficked in the United States is 12 to 14. Why? It's easier. They're easier. And that's who the market is actually geared towards now. When you look at the fact that we have 300,000 underage individuals being trafficked in the United States, and I use conservative numbers because I don't like it when we try to make things seem worse than they are. We don't need to make it worse. It's already bad, okay? So we don't need to make it sound worse. You look at how many clients they had to serve per day. Anywhere between 5 and 40 are the numbers. That's the spectrum, okay, of how many they have to service per day. So if we just hit the middle, let's just say 20, okay? And again, these are just numbers, but I just want to give us a perspective. That means there's 6 million American men willing to pay to have sex with a minor every day in the United States. What's the biggest problem here? It's what's going on in the hearts of our men. That's the biggest problem. That's the biggest target. For every demand that is made, it's increasing the demand. It's increasing the demand. There will always be, we can rescue one girl after another, and there will be a new supply because of the demand for this. So you've got the three players of the trafficker, the victim, and the purchasers. The purchasers are the biggest pool we have here. Finally, in the state of Texas, they've begun to do something about it, and they've made it felony charges now if you're paying to have sex. Okay, we can finally do something about it and go after that issue. But again, that's an after effect. It's not getting to the root of the problem. So I just want to encourage the men in the room. I love getting to speak to men because I have a heart for men. Because I'm like, you keep being told that you're the problem, right? We're the problem, we're the bad ones, we're the problem. No, you're not. You're actually the solution. You are the solution to this. Because when men rise up and they go, wait a minute, we need to protect these women and these kids from what's going on here. When men rise up in that, it's game over. We're done. We don't have to deal with this anymore. So the men in the room, thank you for being here. Just thank you for being here. And for your position on this battlefield, I am grateful personally. So again, when I look back at the story of my own father, he was grooming these kids. And I told people all the time, my dad was the first person to church and the last one to leave. And he was playing with your kids. And he had candy in his pocket for them. And you thought he was safe because he was in the church. I have nothing against church. I love Jesus. I'm at church most of the time. So I don't have a problem with that. But I'm just telling you, this is taking on every walk of life, and they will groom wherever they can. They don't care. If they get access online or in person, they will use it to groom because that's their appetite that they're trying to gratify. Then we have those that are sold by their parents or their guardians. That makes up about, I think it's 11% now of trafficking cases are parental. And then through the foster system. Over 60% of individuals that end up in this world went through the foster system. I know that's not shocking anyone. And then there's the recruitment. Lastly is kidnapping. My gosh, y'all, that is not what's happening most of the time. That's not your biggest concern, okay? I would say if you're the parent of a child or if you're a grandparent, don't worry about your kid getting kidnapped, okay? That's not most likely what's going to happen. Worry about who your kid's talking to online. That's what I would tell you. The access online is the problem. I tell people all the time, would you take your, let's say, 7-year-old child, because that's the average age now of exposure to porn in the United States, would you take your 7-year-old child and say, hey, I'm going to drop you off at the park to play for the next 2 hours, and it just so happens this park is located in the zip code that is known to have the highest level of sexual predators, but you have fun for the next 2 hours playing in that park. I'm going to go over here for a while because I got some stuff to do. Would anyone do that? No, but that's what we're doing online to our kids. We're literally being like, hey, I need you to get entertained for the next 2 hours so I can get some stuff done. And so I'm going to leave you unmonitored with the greatest level of access for predators, and hope you deal well with that. Hope you don't get fooled. Oh my gosh, like that's literally what we're doing today with what's happening online. My dad happened to use the physical access that he had to children. That's how he groomed. And again, just so y'all know, he is in prison and will be the rest of his life. I hate that because he's still my dad. But I will tell you this, I have no regrets, because his victims needed to know that it mattered and that someone would stand up for them. They needed to know that it mattered. Unfortunately, and I just want to play this story out for y'all really quick so you can see what happens and how things continue to progress in a bad way in our current system. So these victims, they finally have the courage to give an outcry. They gave their outcry at a church youth camp. Why? Yeah, they thought they were safe. This was probably the only time they were out of the context of the abuse. So if we're not training youth workers to know what to do, things can go bad. They gave an outcry. Guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing. The youth workers told the youth pastor. The youth pastor did not follow up to take care of those kids. So this is why that investigator's my hero. That man went to that church in the middle of church service and walked straight up to the pulpit and told that church, you are responsible for what happened to these girls. You should pay for their therapy for the rest of their lives if they need it, because you did nothing. That's a good investigator. He was committed, y'all. He was really upset about what had happened. And he told the church the truth. Like, y'all are responsible for this. But they didn't know what to do. They did not know what to do. And sometimes we don't understand that doing nothing is more harmful than if those girls had never even told. Because what message did that give to those girls? Wasn't worth the risk, right? So fast forward when it's discovered again that they're being abused. They end up, after giving their outcry, giving their information to law enforcement, their mother has them put in juvenile detention center. Can you imagine? The worst place they could have been. What they needed was to be loved and cared for and nurtured after what they had been through. Instead, they were punished. I was going nuts, throwing every fit I knew how to throw because I couldn't get anyone to listen. If y'all are doing everything wrong right now, these girls don't belong there, they need help. So I'm looking all over the whole nation trying to find a place for them to be able to go where they could get safe and get healing. And guess what I found? Nothing. I could not find anything. I couldn't find anything. And I'm literally sitting in my office one evening crying, asking God, like, would you please help me? I cannot find any place for them. And he told me, I need you to create it. So every program I wrote at the beginning of my career was written for the victims of my own father. What they would need, what I would want them to have if I could provide for them what I felt like they needed. That's where I wrote every program from. And I knew it came from the heart of God for them. And that's how I want every single survivor to be treated, is the way I would want them to be treated. Turns out, you don't know that this is going to happen, but not only were they put in juvenile detention centers, then when my dad was finally, convicted and we got the bad guy and yay, 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 they put it all over the news. You don't know that your life is about to be all over the news. You don't know that that's coming. No one notifies you. You just wake up and your dad's all over the news. And so here I am running this organization, trying to help women who've been sexually exploited and abused, and my dad's on the evening news. And the details of his abuse was written, was spoken, and these victims were re-victimized again for the story, for the sensationalism of it all. Our appetite for sensationalism is victimizing people. It is truly re-victimizing people. It's not okay. He's in prison. I don't care, like, if people know what he did. I don't care if they know he was my dad. What I cared about was these young girls still have to walk around in their community, and now people know details of what happened to them. That's humiliating, and it's wrong. So there were breakdowns all along the way that I kept seeing of how we have failed to serve these girls. We just have failed in so many ways. And so I care about all of it. I just want to see every single bit of this fixed. But anyhow, so back to this. Recruitment is one thing I would say is happening not just online. It's not just happening directly with predators to a child or a potential victim, vulnerable person. They also use others to recruit. We see this happening through the schools. You have one girl, this was in a very prominent neighborhood in DFW, wealthy people, whole 9 yards, nice school that they feel real proud about, and there's a girl who is having to recruit. Okay, she's being forced. She was being trafficked by a gang. She's forced to recruit. So she befriends this other girl. This girl feels sorry for her because she doesn't have a normal family. She's trying to bring her home and bring her into family. The mother's trying to love on her. She built this for a year. She built this relationship for a year with this girl before she finally convinced her to sneak out with her one night. Sneak out one night. She takes her to the apartment where the guys are. They gang rape her that night. It was a rough gang. She escapes. She is running naked down the street. Luckily, a woman about my age sees her, grabs her, gets her in the car, and takes her to the police station. They call her parents. But because of the fact that this girl who recruited her knows the family, knows where they live, she has all the information. That family had to sell their house. The girl, after she went through this experience, had to be flown to another state for her safety. Do you see the aftermath? And but that's how she recruited. It was through another girl that befriended her. So you have the boyfriends that are sent into these situations. You have friends that are also part of recruitment. And y'all may be seeing some of this stuff too. I may not be telling you anything you don't know, but I'm just letting you know that's what we've seen. I'm going backwards again. Okay, so this is more of a lengthy process. It's also the most common in the United States. It's not the kidnapping. That's not the most common in the United States. In other countries, it is. In Mexico, they will just throw somebody in a car and they're gone. They may have been trying to get some food at a taco stand and they are gone. Okay, that does happen, but not here. The groomer is what we call the Romeo trafficker, who preys on the vulnerabilities of the victim, and they make them feel like they're going to take care of them or understand them, provide something for them that they don't have. Once a relationship is built, then they're told that now they got to help out. Now you got to pay us back. We took care of you. Now you got to take care of us. So those are some common things that we see. And they don't realize, the victims don't know that their boyfriend or their friend is the pimp and the trafficker. They don't know. They will tell you that's their boyfriend. Every single young girl that we have worked with, that was her boyfriend. 100%. Sold by parents or guardians. Sometimes they are actually the ones that are trafficking their own children. A lot of times we see this associated with drugs. So there was a case that was, it was in Louisiana. And this young mom, she was 19 years old. She was selling her 6-month-old baby for drugs. So of course, they contacted Roe, because the AG was needing help with that case, and he can find people really fast, and they found that baby in 2 hours, and they were able to rescue that child and put everyone. There were 6 men, because they did this on Facebook. Literally, this was on Facebook. She was selling her baby, so they were able to get 6 of the men and lock them up too. But parents will do that a lot of times associated with drugs, money, or if their mom is in the lifestyle and the kid is just around that environment, it's easy access. And then, yeah, in other third world countries, we definitely see the parents selling their kids. Through the foster system, individuals who have been or currently in the foster system are at higher risk for trafficking. And what we have seen is that there's a lot of corruption in the system to begin with. There's a lot of corrupt families. One of the ladies I sat with, a survivor, a couple weeks ago, and she was sharing with me that she was in 6 different placements in her childhood. 6 different placements. 4 of those placements abused her. 4 out of the 6. Abusing her themselves and selling her. We talked about recruitment. Usually they're trying to friend, they're kind of being forced to do the recruitment as well. Which when you are working then with a survivor who has also been forced to recruit others, it's a layered effect of guilt and shame and trauma. So just know that they may be dealing with the fact that they brought someone else in to that life as well. And this one is so, oh my gosh, y'all think this is like just a movie. It's real, okay? They really do present themselves as they're going to make them famous. We're all going to get famous, and we're going to give you a job. You're going to be a model, or we've got a band, or we're going to make it big. It's real. It really does happen. We had a girl that I worked with for a long time. She's amazing. She's a survivor leader now. She's in Florida now, just doing a great job. But she was literally recruited with this whole thing of, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. You could be a model. We've got this. We'll take pictures. We'll get you all set up. Okay, what do you think happened when she went to go do those photos? Wasn't the kind of pictures that she was hoping they would be, and they had her. It seems like it wouldn't really work, but it actually does. And these people will be set up at malls, like Latasha said, and they're acting like they're going to take you to go become a model, and they're approaching, and they're looking for those vulnerabilities. Kidnapping is typically snatch and grab. It's not really what we're having. As it can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. It's just not the most common here. All right, so what can we be looking for? In children, we're going to divide it between children and adults because it's it's overlap, but there's some differences. Signs of physical abuse. Unexplained absences from school. Yes, these kids are being sold and having to go to school. There was a report done by the organization Thorn. This was a couple years ago, I think. And they interviewed minors who had already been trafficked, and they asked them, if you were going to give an outcry, who would you have most likely given an outcry to? And they said, a teacher. So if we have educators, or if we have access to training educators, that would be another frontline group that would be really great to invest in letting them understand the signs of what they may be seeing and putting some context around it if this could be something that's happening. All of a sudden, there's some inappropriate dress. They're exhausted. They're falling asleep in class. You'll see their grades drop, or they used to be involved in extracurricular activities, and now they aren't. They have sexualized behavior. They're withdrawn, depressed, distracted. All of a sudden, they got some expensive clothes and accessories because, again, he's grooming, right? So he's luring her in. New tattoos. Have y'all seen? There's branding tattoos. We have to do a lot of, women want those removed or covered, so we have to do a lot of tattoo work on the back end of that to get those removed. Or they have a much older boyfriend, or they've got new friends that have a completely different lifestyle than what you've seen them. There's gang involvement, disjointed family connections, running away, living with friends, homelessness. That's number one. If they're experiencing homelessness, now the new statistics that came out in 2020 is that within 24 hours of a minor experiencing homelessness, they are going to be approached by a trafficker or a pimp. Within 24 hours. It used to be 48. Now they've gotten faster. This was from a 2020 report that within 24 hours of a minor experiencing homelessness, they will be approached by a pimp or a trafficker. And what we were seeing in Dallas specifically was with the public transport. So you have the individuals who are part of the whole, trafficking thing that are positioned at the bus stations or the train stations. And that's their whole job, is that between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., they're watching to see who's getting on these buses. They know the normal people, that's just when they have to travel, and they know the kid that just got on with the backpack, and they approach. They know what they're doing. They've positioned themselves to be there so they can get these kids that have run away from home. And why did they run away from home? Probably escaping abuse that they were experiencing in the home, right? So they're already vulnerable and predisposed. If they're under 18 and they're providing commercial sex acts, there's your sign. Sexual content on social media, or one thing that we've noticed is that if they have followers that largely outweigh how many people they're following, so if they've got 200 people they're following, but they've got 3,000 that are following them, they're primarily male, they're probably being advertised on social media platforms. Okay, those are easy things that if you're looking to try to figure something out, just look and see who they're with on those platforms. This is adults. They're not free to come and go at will. They're in the commercial sex industry and they have a pimp or a manager. We had a lot of girls that were in the strip clubs, but they had their pimp as well. They're unpaid, they're paid indirectly, very little or paid only through tips. They work excessively long hours, unusual hours. They're not allowed to take breaks. This can be with labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking. You can see the overlaps. They owe a large debt. They're unable to pay it off. The largest or the fastest growing form, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, you're good. Please go for it. Yes, of course. Of course. If I can figure out how to go back. That's the main problem we're having here. There you go. No, you're good. You're good. And we can, feel free to take your phone out and take a picture of the slides too. That would be, yeah. I have to do that because it takes me forever to write the information. So the fastest growing form of human trafficking in the United States right now are what's happening in the massage parlors. Okay? Did you notice, if anybody's about my age or around there, did you notice that there weren't any and then all of a sudden there were? And they were everywhere? Right? Yeah. Same. They found another. Yeah. Same. And they're gonna. It's about money. Like, it's about making money. So we have in the United States, there are now 10,000 illicit massage businesses. 10,000. And I promise you that was a fast market. And it worked. It's very successful. But what you have then are internationally trafficked victims brought here. They don't speak the language. They've got the language barrier. They were sold either a lie of what was going to happen when they got here, or they were sold by their family to come here. And they are stuck. This is the most trapped population. And we, in my opinion, have not even begun to figure out how to serve them. We're not. And they are not getting out. I can tell you that right now. We sat on a location in partnership with Fort Worth PD. Basically, they didn't have the manpower to monitor, so we set up the cameras and then our team, they just let us monitor and we kept records and we gave them, this is how many clients are coming in per day. This is how long they're staying, so that we could then basically go after them for, are they really saying they're making on their tax, on their 990, are they really bringing in what we can verify that they were selling? Because there's no way, you cannot get, the victims will not testify. They're not going to give an outcry at all. It's just really, really hard to get those cases, and they know it. So we were able to go in as, we went in with code compliance. That's what we did. So our team went in with code compliance, and we acted like we were all code compliance and had videos. And, they had beds there that they were sleeping in. There was one little tiny room, and they had little boxes of their clothes and their little toothbrushes. And so we're like, okay, well, that's a violation. You cannot live in this, this business establishment. So what did they do? They took 30 days, because that's how long they had to get compliant. And we watched them bringing in, first of all, they moved the business to another location because they're all connected. So they just operated somewhere else, and they started building walls inside of that establishment. I know they were trying to figure out how to hide. It was craziness, but the case never went anywhere because they couldn't move on it. Even though we had pages of evidence, there was nothing they could do about it. But yeah, you're going to see, we'll go back to this slide. The recruitment was through false promises. If you see a location where there's some high security measures that are happening there, opaque windows, boarded up windows, bars on windows, security cameras everywhere, something bad's going on in there. They're living and working on site. So they don't have we had one case in Dallas. Those women never saw the light of day. They were kept in this place. Literally, they never got to leave. Another one, we would watch them load up. Once the borders of Cuba opened, all of a sudden, strip clubs completely were taken over with these Cuban girls. And they were having to sleep. The house mom talked to us because we were friends. She was like, these girls are sleeping here. Another one, they had a bus, and they'd pick them up and take them to this apartment complex where 10 of them are sleeping in one apartment, and then they bring them back the next day. But they have no free will to move about at all. I don't know why I keep going back. I keep hitting things. Sorry, y'all. And then they're experiencing verbal or physical abuse by their supervisor. They're not given proper safety equipment, and they're forced to meet daily quotas. So those are some signs. If you are encountering them and you see them being fearful, anxious, depressed, submissive, tense, nervous, paranoid, they're unusually fearful or anxious, especially at the mention of law enforcement or immigration. If they start freaking out, there's a reason, okay? So he's like, I have seen this. And they show signs of substance use or addiction. Par for the course. It just goes hand in hand. That's why I love those of you that are working with this population as well, because it's all overlapping. The drug use is going to coexist with sex trafficking, period. It just is, every single time. Then you've got the signs of poor physical health, right? I can't even tell you how many times we get girls and they're coming into our safe house. They may have a trash bag of belongings. Typically, they just have what they're wearing. And it doesn't matter. It can be the dead of winter. And these girls are wearing short shorts and a tank top and flip-flops. They have no coat, no jacket, nothing. Nothing. They don't have appropriate attire. You can see different signs of physical or sexual abuse, physical restraint, confinement, torture. Again, please feel free to take pictures of these slides. I just need to check my time to make sure I'm not going over. So sorry, y'all. Their claims of just visiting, and they can't tell you where they're staying. They don't know their address. If they can't give you an address, if they don't have any form of ID, you've got two major red flags that this person could potentially be a victim of human trafficking. I'm trying to think. I have not yet served a woman that had an ID. No, I haven't. So that's, again, in my experience, it doesn't mean it's accurate, but in my experience, 100% of them did not have their own ID. They appear to have lost sense of time. Why? Yeah. And there's no days and nights you're just working whenever. You don't get a day off. There's no sense of if that burner phone rings, you better answer it. I don't care if you slept 1 hour. You better answer that call because you've got to make a certain amount of money. So there's no sense of time didn't matter. One of the ladies that we're serving, she was trafficked from the time, she was sold out of an orphanage from the time she was little. She doesn't even know how old she is. We celebrated her birthday last year and we just acted like she was 40 because we don't really know. And so she had no sense of time whatsoever. She had never gotten to go to school, so she didn't know the days of the week or the months of the year. Why would she need to know that? So there's no sense of time a lot of times. The shared scripted, confusing, or inconsistent stories, and then they protect the person who may be hurting them, and they minimize abuse, just like Latasha said. I was doing a sting operation with Tarrant County and Fort Worth PD, and every single girl that I sat with, because they brought me in as an advocate to try to offer resources and blah, 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 blah. Every single girl, no, he's not my pimp. That's the Uber driver. He's just the Uber driver. I don't know him. He's sitting out there. No Uber driver's going to sit and wait on you, first of all. He's going to go on to get the next person. But it was a script, I'm telling you. That's the Uber driver. No, I don't know him. They're protecting him, and they're saying he's the Uber driver. They've all been told the same script. All right, so let's talk about how close to home this occurs. There's typically familiarity between the victim and the trafficker. They've either built rapport online, they've had that physical, in-person grooming process going on. There's typically, you're going to have some familiarity between them, and it often stems from dysfunction in their early childhood. Okay, what created the vulnerabilities, right? Latasha was like, look, I had a pawpaw. I'm not going to fall for this crazy stuff you're trying to do to me, because she had a healthy environment, right? I could have been, all kinds of bad things could have happened to me because I had every vulnerability you could possibly have. Okay, so this is when these are things, let me just grab your attention away from that for a minute. These are statistics. These are percentages. But what I'm trying to tell you is these are people. When you think about, when you're encountering a woman, potentially, and maybe in your past, you looked at her and went, she's just a prostitute. That's just a hoe. I want you to look at what they have been through before they stood in front of you, and make them real people again, because that's who they are. And these are the things they have survived and lived through. 13% have mothers who were also prostituted. 70% are from fatherless homes. Again, man, you're the solution. 87% grew up in a substance abusing household. 73% experienced abuse from a family member. 85% are survivors of child sexual abuse, most often by age 8, at the hands of an immediate family member. Okay, let's just look at this. Let's just take one of those. Let's just say that you grew up in a substance abusing household. Okay? Let's just take that one thing. How does that mess with you as a kid? Yeah, it seems normal. I remember, because my mom, she didn't end her life this way, but she was an alcoholic for a bit because she was living with my dad, okay? So I love him, we have grace, all right? But nevertheless, she was an alcoholic. So my mom didn't know it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when she's telling me I have to go to bed. I haven't done my homework, I haven't eaten dinner, nothing. And she's trying to make me go to bed. Well, how does that affect my school? I didn't get to do my homework. It's not because I was a bad student. I was a straight A student working my butt off, but I didn't get to eat dinner, and I didn't get to do my homework. And I'm up in the morning as early as I can trying to get my homework done before the school bus comes, because Mom didn't know it was 5 o'clock. She thought it was bedtime because she has no clue because she's drunk. I don't know how many times I had to get in a car and ride with her. And my older sister's screaming because she knows we're about to wreck. Just that one factor. If I had had social media back then, oh my gosh, I might have been given all kinds of outcries for, my mom is whatever. Who knows? And that's easy material for a predator, right? It says 85% are survivors of child sexual abuse. In my experience, it's 100%. I have not met one person yet who that was not their story. I believe my numbers are accurate. I believe it's 100%. I just haven't had, and I have worked with hundreds, I'm probably in the thousands at this point, of women, and I have not met one yet that was not her story. So when that's been your experience as a child, it's much easier for these things to happen and for you to be preyed upon. Then once they begin being trafficked, let's look at this package. 79% engage in survival sex, which means I have to have sex just to have food, to have a shelter, whatever, to have my basic needs met. All right? Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't have food for a while? Did you ever get hungry? Did you ever have to stay out on the streets because you didn't have a place to stay overnight? What would you have done if those days turned into a couple of weeks? None of us know what we would be capable of with the wrong set of circumstances. So the minute we think we would never do that, you don't know that. You don't know that. The minute we try to judge people because we think we're above that, we weren't in their situation. We probably would have had to do whatever we had to do to survive too. And I tell these women all the time, whatever you did to survive, good for you. You're still here. You did survive. We can dig through all that later, but good for you, you're still here, right? There's resiliency in you. 64% have been tortured. Okay, some of you may have been hurt. Some of you may have been abused. Have you been tortured? I have terrible stories that I won't share. I don't tell people the stuff I know because you don't need it in your head unless you're called to have to know it. People can do horrific things to other people, and it is called torture, and it is prevalent in this. And you want to talk about this as viable work? Do you show up to your job thinking it's very possible today that I could be tortured and that be okay? No, it's not. It's not a job. It's not a normal job. They're not just making good money. They're being tortured. 67% have been forced to do offensive acts. You can fill in the blanks. Average of 4.3 years of being trafficked. That's my alarm, y'all, to let me know I have a 15-minute margin before it. I have to do this to myself or I'll talk forever. I have too much stuff in my head. 74.6 have been arrested. 58.7% have been incarcerated. Only 9% have seen their trafficker meet justice. Who's carrying all the records? Who's got the rap sheet? Who has to go do the drug deals? Who's getting prostitution charges? Who has all the debt in their name? The victims. And they have to dig out of that after the fact. Their names have been used on every credit card. They have houses and cars in their names. Then the children that they never even got to see or raise, some of them are now being charged with child support. So they can't even get their Social Security because they have outstanding child support that they haven't paid for children that were taken from them. The aftermath is terrible. This is their trauma profile. Again, just imagine if you have had some of the experiences we just talked about in the childhood and then being trafficked. You're going to have some trauma. 79% of them have experienced the death of a parent, child, or close relative, which has been the doorway a lot of times to the grieving and the vulnerabilities. We've seen that happen. 25% of them present as likely to have traumatic brain injury. Why? They've been beat, okay? And now it's affected them. They have long-term effect from that. 60% report sleep problems, which is hilarious to me. That's like the 85% have experienced childhood. 100% of them have sleep problems. I've never met one that didn't. They've experienced homelessness, being threatened with a weapon. Anybody have that life experience? That'll mess with you. That'll mess with you for a long time. And then when law enforcement comes in, guess what they have? They have weapons. That's scary, right? They have power, and they have a weapon, and they have authority. That'll mess with you. 79% have been the victim of a violent crime. 70% have been held captive. 43% have attempted suicide, and 49% are self-injuring. Why don't they just leave? This is my favorite question. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's just talk about the fact that if you've been held captive, if you've been threatened with a weapon, if you have been tortured, what is your reality telling you? When he says that he'll kill me if I try to leave, what do you believe? He's going to kill me. I already watched him kill this girl because they have watched that happen in front of them because that's how they control the rest. And I'm giving, everything I'm telling you is because of real cases that I've worked. This is not, I'm making up something from Hollywood. I'm only using real stories of women I have served. Okay? I just want y'all to know that. So they don't leave for a lot of reasons. Intimidation, abuse, they're addicted. That's very handy for traffickers. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's it. It's the trauma bonding. And that is the person that, even though they deprive them and abuse them and everything, that's still who took care of them. Right? And they tell them all the time, nobody else is going to take care of you but me. So when we're trying to tell them we have this and we can provide this, they will go back and they'll tell me, no, he's the only one that's going to take care of me. He's the one that's been there. He's the one that's taking care of me. And I'm like, but you cannot bust through that trauma bond. It is a real thing. And this is a lot of reasons why they don't want to testify either. They don't, because they feel guilty because that was their boyfriend. Intimidation, abuse, addiction, fear, threats to the victim and or loved ones. And then again, we have this power control wheel. It's the same one that Latasha went over. Is it all making sense? Yeah. These are, if you want to get your phone out and take a photo of some resources, these are ones that I would recommend. The Body Keeps the Score is the best book you could ever read if you want to understand trauma. And I would highly encourage you, if you work with survivors, that you understand trauma. It's key. This would be the equivalent, in my opinion, of, let's say, a surgeon who had never actually used the tools, like a scalpel, and now he's going to go do brain surgery on you. If you don't know about trauma, you're like a doctor with no scalpel. I'm not kidding. It's that important that you understand trauma. That book is amazing. So how many of you, are there any veterans in the room? First of all, thank you. Y'all are awesome. One of the things that was so astounding to me from this book was the realization that the only population that experiences post-traumatic stress disorder at the same level of men who have participated in combat war are those who have experienced sexual abuse. So the effects that we see on our veterans who had to participate in combat war, when they come back and try to live a normal life now, do you know how hard that is to translate back to normal life? It's real hard. Same for these women. Trying to now go to Walmart and act like you're like everybody else. They don't feel like they're like everybody else at all. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go to church because that's safe. Guess who's sitting in church? The pastor that came to the strip club while I was dancing, saying that he was just there to protect me. Okay, that's a safe place for all of us that can ignore what's going on with people at church. Do you understand that daily life, going to get medical care, that seems like a normal thing that we do because we take good care of ourselves, right? This is not an easy thing for these individuals. What I have witnessed, because I've been there, what I have witnessed with the treatment of those who have been in this life trying to get medical care, they're treated horrifically. I've watched it. I was on the phone with a girl. She's out in California. He'd shoved metal up inside of her, okay, and punished her with a metal pipe. She had to go get surgery. That's why she's in the hospital, because she had to have surgery for what he did to her. And now they're trying to put her out because, you know why? Because COVID, we need the beds. It's time for you to go. She hasn't even been able to recover yet. And she's telling them, my pimp is out there. He is waiting for me. You cannot send me out of here. She has me on the phone. She's got them on the phone on speaker, and I'm sitting here listening to this actually happening. I heard the way they treated her. And they're like, that's not our problem. You have to go. We need the beds. I couldn't believe it, but I heard it myself. And I'm over here in Texas in the middle of that stupid snowmageddon. We can't get anybody a flight in from anywhere because DFW is shut down. And here she is on the phone going, I cannot leave. Y'all, we were trying to help her with every resource we could figure out in California, which was not easy. And this girl her stitches are bleeding. She is in a mess, and they're sending her out. Yes. This is why we have to have the hard conversations, and we have to tell the realities, and we have to see these women as human beings. They're not hoes. They're not prostitutes. These are victims, and they should be treated with the utmost care. And I tell people all the time, if this were my daughter, I have a 26-year-old daughter. If this were my daughter, how would I want her to be cared for? How would I want the law enforcement to treat her? How would I want the medical community to handle her? How would I want long-term restorations to provide for her? We have to provide the same kind of care for every one of these that we would want for our own if they were in this situation. We have to treat it that way. And we have to open up our eyes to the reality of they did not decide to do this with their lives. There were from childhood on reasons why they ended up where they ended up. Okay? It wasn't their life goal. They aren't here because they love what they're doing. They don't know how to get out. So if you're intersecting them, I will say the medical community, I highly, highly encourage training because you could be the ones that saves them out of it. If you have some protocols in place, I want to give you a resource. It's Reclaim 611. That organization was started by RNs who said, we've got to figure out how to do this better because they're coming through our doors all the time and we are not serving them well. They have a free online training. It's 3 hours. It's amazing. They did a phenomenal job. It is a great resource, and I trust that organization. They will come and train. They're awesome, but that would be a great resource if you're in the medical community. If you're in the law enforcement community, first of all, thank you for being willing to deal with every day the worst of what people can come up with to do. That's what you have to see all the time. And I know it's hard because you're having to come on the scene when everything is a mess every single time. You're on the scene trying to figure out who's the bad guy, who did this, what crimes have been committed, what do we have to do? You're having to think about all the legal stuff. But in front of you could be a victim. And I'm just asking you to take a minute and see her. Just see her. And she may be cussing at you. She may be strung out on drugs. But see her and ask yourself a few questions. Is there something going on here that maybe is more than what I'm thinking it is? How can I treat this woman with, what can I do? Because if I send her right back out into this, what's going to happen next? You could be the worst or the best encounter she ever had. You really could be. And I just want to encourage you that there are resources. I want the law enforcement to get connected to the resources so that you can go back and do your job, but hand them off. Truly hand them off to get help. That's what they need. They need help. They don't need another felony on their record. They need help. I appreciate y'all so much just for hanging with me before lunch. Y'all are amazing. I'm grateful. If you have any questions, I definitely want to answer those. I know we'll do a Q&A at the end, but If you have anything burning right now, I'm happy to answer. Yes. Um, I don't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say, yeah, what you could do is very limited. That's why partnerships are going to be huge for you. And I don't know what here locally. Good. Perfect. Yeah, y'all get him some numbers and resources because you need those quick. You don't have time to sit and case manage. That's not what your job is. Yes. Yeah, so that would be another hotspot for recruitment for sure. And it goes back to what Latasha was saying. So the ages 16 to 24 that's the highest percentage of dating violence. That the population that's 16 to 24, that's who's experiencing dating violence the most. So you look at the majority of that is in their college experience. One of the girls we worked with, she was actually from Oklahoma, and that's where she got approached, was in college. And so recruitment is happening on campuses. What I would say is that if you could have start with raising awareness within the campus. So having a panel, of experts that could come and talk about the dating violence in conjunction with what's happening with sex trafficking and recruitment and how you could be being approached. I would say, again, that would be the highest vulnerability for sure, in your position perfectly to be able to start at least the conversation. And then finding out who are the resources in your area that you could bring to, just like this, setting up some booths and getting information out. If you could get your college campus to start an awareness group that's just focused on anti-trafficking and just fuel the heck out of them, they could start really just the conversation, I think would be huge. But yeah, that's a big vulnerability. So I'm glad you're here. Yes. Awesome. They're good. Awesome. Yeah, this type of room, if y'all just spend lunch mingling and talking to each other, what we've been able to do where I am in Fort Worth is we have a pretty good streamline now of handing off. I used to run track and I always had to run the relays. So that baton had to be successfully handed off or you don't make it, right? It's the same with these victims. Once there's an identification, there needs to be a clear process. Like you said, I need a clean handoff so that I can go on and do my job and know the next person is going to run with that baton to the next step. So that's what I would encourage, is that y'all really come up with a good, these are the people, these are the players. Let's get a resource sheet put together to start with where we're like, okay, this is step one, phase one. Who does identification? Who does awareness? Who does restoration? Who does immediate response? Get everybody identified and then start putting it in a streamlined process of how you can walk someone so that it feels seamless for her. That we're doing the work behind the scenes to get that handoff so that she doesn't feel that, right? That she just feels like there's a community that's helping her walk into freedom. Not, oh, she fell through the cracks there. Oh, well, we dropped the ball there. Or she feels like the handoffs are just one organization to the next, to the next, to the next, and she gets weary of it, Yes, here first. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, so I want to just say quickly that this is a population that is it's becoming aware that this is a significant percentage of vulnerable population that's being trafficked. And it came on the radar, I would say for me personally, a few years ago. We have served one survivor that was Native American. And under the Trump administration, when he had really released a lot of grant money, he had specified a lot of funding specifically for Native Americans. And then I don't really know that it got utilized or what happened to all of that. But I was excited to see that it was at least making the agenda, you know, but it's still, I would say it is we're aware that it's a significant percentage, but I would say I don't know that there's been a lot of work done yet to really. No, just one. I've worked with one survivor. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The stigma. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm. Right. Yeah. 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 And it is a whole, like you said, you have to understand the cultural differences in order to know how to serve well and actually see the vulnerabilities, meet them, and do true prevention. You know, me doing a presentation doesn't necessarily prevent anything. Providing true prevention programs do, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, good. That's awesome. Well, keep going. Keep going. I thank you for that because it's definitely significant. So thank you for that. I'm sorry. I'm handing over my microphone because she's here waiting. Thank you. Thanks.